We want to start. Everybody has something to drink, something else, needs more eating. Okay. Thank you at first for all of you have been here, and more especially thanks to our 5 people here on the stage. We have never 5 people to talk on a user group here in Cologne, and I think it's also worldwide really first time that 5 speakers there. So we want to do something like different to other user groups. We don't want to talks like the normal way, so talks about Symfony, talks about PHP or Symfony ecosystem. I think it's in every interesting setting we are now to try to do something like a podium discussion, and we want to discuss about Symfony, the Symfony ecosystem, who's present at this way, for example, like Sylius or Sulu or Doctrine. And we want to do talk about a little bit about PHP, about open source, about everything we want to talk. But I think, for example, results are not so interesting for everyone. So we will talk about programming and Symfony. And first of all, we start with a little bit opening setting. So we want to start at the left side with Lukasz, and we want to start to explain who are you, where you're from, what you do, for example, and we tell something, 2 beginning questions. So the first question is, do you prefer drink tea or coffee, and if it's tea, why black? And the second one is, if you set up a blank project with PHP, what's your favorite PHP library and why? For example, PHP Stan, CS Fixer or something else. So introduce yourself and answer the 2 questions. And then the next one.
So hello everyone, I for sure could take better place to have more time to figure out the proper answer.
Anybody who's starting? Sorry.
Sure. My name is Lukasz Chruściel. I came to you from Poland. On daily basis I was maintaining for many years Sylius project, where I still a core team lead, and I try to maintain the project itself. So right now I also do like working on the projects that involve usually Sylius, but not only at the commerce weavers. And yeah, that's the main stuff about me, I suppose. Other than that, I really tea lover, so for me the question is super simple. Unfortunately, black tea is not on the top of my list. Otherwise, I prefer green or oolong tea, which and I can only invite you to actually explore the world of tea with some better taste. It's enough to know a little bit more about timing and proper temperature, and it appeared that with a little bit of experience you can really craft good tea. So for me the answer was simple, and once I will start the project, which library I will select, probably yes, some static analyzers are always a good choice, because other than that I would say, of course, Sylius, but it would have to be an e-commerce project. I would probably took Symfony, but it would need to be some proper web app or just components. So without any knowledge, the static analyzer seems to be the easiest answer, because you will need them always, no matter the project. You can always take advantage of them. As well, of course, Doctrine would be a perfect choice if I would have any database abstraction, etc. Thank you very much. That's all from me.
Thank you. So we go only next by next. So
it's easier for us. So my name is Thomas. I am from Austria, and I am the co-founder of Sulu, which is the company backing Sulu, the CMS, which is a Symfony-based CMS. That's maybe the reason I'm sitting here. Yeah, I was more or less a developer, and lately I'm more into like organizing all the stuff, do consulting, do trainings. Yeah, that's more or less about me. I am into definitely coffee. I would say maybe more a coffee nerd than a tea. About temperatures and variations of coffee, it's the same. Yeah, coffee and starting a project. Yeah. It's not that easy to question, to be honest. It depends on the project. But yeah, I think some unit testing is quite important. So PHP unit would be something which should be up and running initially before starting anything else.
Okay, thanks. My name is Chruściel. I am from Osnabrück, so I'm from Germany. I'm part of the Symfony core team. I think I started. Well, do you remember? It was you. Maybe. I don't. It was many years ago that I started contributing by fixing a typo in the Symfony documentation. That's all I remember. Nowadays, I'm mainly working on the form and the YAML component and fixing bugs all over the code base and fixing red builds in the CI.
Somebody has to do it.
Yeah, someone has to do it. And while starting a new project, I was thinking something along the line what you were saying about testing tools. If we install a PHP unit via Composer, I think that's probably a good start. Yeah, so I think I would join you along that.
Tea or
Yeah.
coffee?
Tea or coffee.
Oh, sorry about that. I'm definitely into coffee. I don't know how many liters I drink a day, but it's definitely more than tea.
A coffee machine could tell you.
Probably, yeah. And well, yeah, I'm so into it that the machine had to be changed after I did not really care about it. Sorry for that.
So hello, I'm Nicolas. I'm from Paris, France. I'm half Greek. My father's Greek, but I spend only the summer there. I speak a bit of Greek for summer. I speak French also. I used to study German, but I forgot everything. So maybe sometimes I can understand, but just basics. So I think I'm the top contributor of Symfony today. I started at the same time as you. I think it was like 2013 or 14. But we don't count in years, because years, you know, this is too common, so we count in versions of Symfony. So I started at Symfony 2.5, right? Which is quite old. I'm not like I'm not part of the new cool people who started with Symfony 1.4 or even know Symfony 2. But I don't. So about the library, the answer is pretty easy for me. There's only one, which is the Symfony var-dumper component. Because I need to dump variables all the time to understand what happens. So that's the only library that I really, really miss when I, you know, even when I do PHP-A, you know, the APL, the command. I start with require and this, so that I can dump to see what I'm doing. So that's the most important one. Of course, then Symfony stuff. And tea or coffee, I discovered tea recently, and so now at home I have a boiler where I can select the temperature.
That's a game changer.
And so I read at the back of the boxes like how many minutes and what's the right temperature, and it does change. Like I used to not like jasmine tea, and now I do, because I know that you must, it's very short, you just wet them, and so basically that's it. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Alexander. I think I had the shortest travel here. I come from Düsseldorf. Sorry. So everybody who doesn't understand that the colonials are probably our mortal enemies, and rightfully so, because they don't know how to do beer. That's the main issue with the colonials, that they don't know how to do beer.
Yeah, also in Düsseldorf?
Yes, we have beer in Düsseldorf, and it's better. It's better than yes. Also, we do have Carnival.
You only call it.
I think we should stop here.
You say Allah too?
You call it hello? Yeah. Where was I? When I'm not bashing colonials, I work as a freelance developer. I fix other people's code. And I do a lot of open source for really a very long time now. I started submitting patches to a popular open source project, and suddenly they said, well, don't you want to be part of the core team? That project was PHP Mindman, everybody knows it. And many years later, I did the same with Symfony. It took me quite a while longer to join the core team, but I was invited to join it as well. And now I'm collecting core teams because I also joined the core team of the Doctrine project. So yeah, so my little free time that I have, I contribute to open source libraries that I use for my work, and sometimes I can convince my clients to actually also give me a little bit of my pay time to contribute to open source, but yeah, not as often as I wanted to. So the next question was tea or coffee. If you hand me a mug of coffee, then I would probably pour it down into the sink. I'm definitely a tea guy. I don't know. I don't dislike the taste of coffee. I like the smell though. I really enjoy the smell of coffee, but I cannot drink it. It's really. But libraries that I introduce into new software, probably tooling is the most important for me in a piece of software, especially since I work a lot with old software, with legacy code. Static code analysis, or static analysis is certainly something that I need there, so I usually use PHP Stan for that. I also have a pro license for PHP Stan. Yes, you can. Yeah, it's a thing, and I think it's good to have it to actually fund the project because it's really an important project, I think, for the ecosystem. It also gives you a nice web UI, though. I don't know if you have seen this and if you need this, but sometimes I use it. Also, this is something I probably disagree with Symfony a bit, but I use actually PHP Code Sniffer. And I like it. Yeah, okay. Any more? No, those were the questions, right?
Yeah, I think that was it. Okay, so at the beginning, I think we could do a small applause for them, for being all here. Okay, basically at first, we prepared some topics and questions, but I think the 5 are not my private only puppets, so all of you could ask questions, and especially something we want to make some small competition at this way. For everyone who asks really interesting question, we have stuff there, for example, PHP elephants or hats and socks.
I want the socks.
You want a question now?
So everyone could feel free to invite, ask a question. We start with a little bit interesting topic in our mind, and after that, every one of you could join in and put your hand up and ask a question. And after that, we are prepare the things. So the question is not only for everyone. So following questions, you not answer everyone. Could feel free to ask if you want. Only talk normally. So the order now we don't do every time at this way. So we think the question is really interesting. Is any of you scared in pushing, for example, do a mistake and break something? For example, you do an ecosystem and a CMS, and do you ever think about or being scared about pushing something and break really big projects or something else at this way? So you're all open source contributors.
No.
Yeah. Why not?
Well, because you should have your own CI that catches this, right? And you should not probably push every library update directly to production if you cannot ensure that it doesn't break your software. And if my change breaks your CI, then you probably can roll back and file a bug report. So I shouldn't feel responsible if you're losing money if I'm pushing a bug to an open source library. Of course, we have a review process and we have a good test suite that should catch everything. So this also gives me a bit more confidence that if I'm making a mistake, that I'm not breaking like all the Symfony components with like a white space change or something. But still, the test suite that we have doesn't replace yours.
Perhaps I can follow up. So when you start the question, I would say that I actually even try to break things in the project. That's why I have testing suite, and I can be lazy, do not think about all the stuff, just deliver the value that I need based on the current test. And if anything is broken, then fix it. To not load too many things to my memory at the beginning. But then, of course, the one thing that they put a little bit of more pressure is our backward compatibility breaks, which is harder to just write a testing suite for. So there are probably things that I'm scared a little bit more. But just to finalize, I can only follow up what Alexander said. Like, if we are open source contributors, and as long as we are not on your payroll, I do not care if it will break on your end or not. You should have your own CI. We are usually doing it.
I didn't say that I don't care.
Of course, it would be sad.
Yes.
But yeah, I just wanted to Finder just presented it boldly that when you hear that open source contributors are banished or just yelled that they break something for doing something that was available for free and you are not paying for it, it's not the open source developers' fault. Usually they're working, not everyone is in a good position to be paid for open source. They usually commit their own private time. So yeah, as long as you do not have paid versions of software, I think that there's a reduced amount of problems that you should put on open source contributors. So that's what I just wanted to finish with.
Nothing to add, all good. Can agree on that topic. Nobody is pushing something by intention into a repository which fails. So there's always a reason why you change something, and maybe you're not thinking about everything in that moment, so you shouldn't be afraid of it. That's my opinion.
On my side, I would say that it can be still stressful.
Yeah.
Yes.
So being afraid, I agree with you. Then you have the stress, and so you have to deal with that. We have to deal with that. And so at the moment, right now, so we do a release of Symfony every month, minimum. And so at every version, we are wondering what are going to be the reports a few days after, because people update just after, and then if we break something. So it happens quite periodically. I wouldn't say often, but periodically, that there is one component that has one patch, and this component for this version is broken. Somehow, in some way, for some feature. So with Fabian, and recently it happened for the previous version, we wondered, should we do an emergency release, like 1 week after, because we have a fix, etc. We even talked about inventing a new numbering scheme where we would have version, major, minor, patch level, and then we could go up to a 4th level of versioning. So in the end, we decided not, because we can just bump the patch level version. And because then it depends, we have a discussion, is this issue breaking enough project to deserve an emergency release? It's difficult to say, because people that are affected by the issue, they are very annoying. They are first very annoyed, I get that. And then they are also very annoying. I mean, that's the stress I'm mentioning, and I get that. That's normal. I mean, people are reporting that it broke for them, and so suddenly their world falls apart. And yeah. So yesterday I made a release on a package which is not a Symfony package, and then I was in a bubble where suddenly I felt like I broke the internet. But I talked to many people here and nobody noticed. So we got the pull request suddenly out of nothing.
I met one guy who talked to me about this issue.
So you're aware of that? Who else is aware of what I broke yesterday?
I have to tell you the question I've noticed with my pen.
Okay, so let's hear the question. Okay, nice. But that's always interesting. At the current moment in Symfony, we have a few issues that, like we had a security issue recently, and the security patch, the way it's been done fixes the security issue, but fixing the security issue breaks some ways of authenticating in Symfony applications. And like, it's difficult because we could revert, which means reopen the security issue. We won't go this way, and so we need to find a way that we don't know yet, which is a correct one. So fortunately, Alexander has the issue on his client's project. So now it's very good when you have a use case, because so that's one of them. There's another one, the profiler, because you mentioned tests. It's also, even on Symfony, we try to have reviews and to add tests. We require people to add tests. But not everything can be tested, especially integration, like this is on the profiler. So for the profiler, the HTTP client is broken. You don't have the requests that were made during this is not going to be an emergency fix, right? I missed completely because I made the patch that was supposed to fix something that did not fix it. And okay, that's life. That's not super critical. But we have to have this discussion all the time for every single issue regression. Like, we get the stress, and then we try to understand if this is kind of legit, if this requires an emergency fix or not.
But I think what's important to add, sorry about that, is that I think the stress is not upfront before we are doing the releases. It's just that when we break something, of course, it's not that we do not care. Then the stress begins, and we try to fix things as fast as possible. So maybe not for the profiler, which is not that emergency, imminent, but I think we had an issue later last year in the cache component, which broke some use cases where we made the emergency release. But,
and the stress is higher when we make a minor version, like every 6 months. We have 6.2, it just happened. And so when we release 6.2.0 every 6 months, we are like, what is going to happen in the next 2 weeks? Who is going to report the thing saying you fucked up completely?
I mean, we had 2 betas and a release candidate, but of course people start testing it when the final.
Yeah, that's something. That's something I wanted to add. Like this phase before you do the release, you get tested things, test the version up front, and that's not often the case. So you don't get feedback before you release something. Yeah. And we started, for example, now a separate CI where we pull every development release into Sulu and give it a try every commit. And that helps at least the ecosystem which we use, but doesn't help us. So that's
a very good one. Yeah. Because testing dev branches is something that many projects, even open source ones, don't want to know, because they're like, we want a stable base to build our thing on top. But because this is open source, we are all part of one single big community, and so we need to have a conversation all the time. And the continuous integration with the dev version is part of the conversation. So when Doctrine breaks something, before release, we are super happy to be able to tell, hey, this is what is going on your side. And then, we forgot that. And that's great. That's another way to have more test coverage, basically. And so if you can do that, if you know people who do open source, let them know that they really should try and have their CI run with dev branches. And if you can, in your company, it would be great to have one job also with dev versions of your dependencies.
Okay. I liked the idea of your story about Doctrine and your work with other components. So, what's the kind of way you work by side to other projects, for example? So, what you can tell us about work, for example, for Symfony with Doctrine, or for example, Sulu with Symfony, or Sylius with Symfony. Is there something way you are talking to each other, or give feedback, or need feedback, for example, on that way? for example, you say a Symfony, okay, what do you think about version 6.0, for example? That you need something else? Is there something in that way you need feedback or discussion in that way?
I mean, for Symfony in Doctrine, we certainly have this kind of exchange because we have two core developers that are in both core channels and can read the Slack chats of both core channels. So if there is an issue that Symfony has that needs to be fixed in Doctrine, then we know, and vice versa. And for other projects as well, if Symfony is consuming a library or working with a library and notice an issue there, then we report this or we try to even contribute to that libraries. Right?
Yeah, right. What's important also is knowing people. I mentioned that we talked with some of you, but along the year, like it's been 10 years almost, but I managed to meet many contributors and for many projects, and that helps a lot. Really, that really helps a lot. There are so many that I don't know, but I know that then it changes the way we interact with each other, like you guys and others, of course. So Doctrine used to be a foreign project for me at some point because I didn't know anybody, and also because the way the team was structured or the people in the team were not always super helpful. And then because we wanted to have more interaction, we managed to meet each other, and so now it's very much more smooth. So I think that's really important.
I think it's a little bit different when it comes to Doctrine and Symfony and like Sylius and Sylius because we build on top of Symfony. So we contribute and give feedback and fix bugs, but we are not in that like shaping the future of Symfony a lot because we are like really more in our ecosystem or more in our like business. So we try to cooperate more with other CMS, like ideas and features and things to like search is a topic. We try to like bring it into the CMS world. Maybe that could be or should be improved a little bit more, definitely. Yes. But it's kind of limited where you can spend your time. So in our case, we try to more to our domain. Our domain is CMS topics, and try to have an exchange with other open source CMS. And Symfony is for us the foundation where we test, where we give feedback. We try to contribute. So, for example, Alex contributes to the Symfony Messenger, the Redis transport, and things where we are able to do things, but we are not into the topic like shaping the future of Symfony right now. Maybe that should be improved. But
you are one of the most active external projects to contribute to Symfony. Like
and that's not a good sign.
No. That's true. I mean, you're talking about Alexander. There are not so many super active.
Yeah, that's true. And outside the core community or the core community.
Not even the core team is not. Yeah, like we always have jobs, other things to do. So it's like taking a few hours there and there and there, and then it adds up. And Alexander is quite often on Symfony.
Yeah, I maybe it's also about really much. Sulu is quite a small project compared to other projects which are built on Symfony. I think it's generally a problem when you build something on another open source project to really value that and give things back and give feedback and improve and also the ecosystem in that area.
It also helps a lot when meeting people. It changes the way, the flow of contributions. I'm thinking about Drupal. So Drupal is built on Symfony, and nowadays, since a few years. And so because I know a few developers in the core team, I met them, they are, it's way easier for them to get back to us and maybe contribute, at least they know who to reach when their CI is broken, and they know they don't have to create workarounds because they can talk to us. And this didn't used to be always the case like that. Like, people used to consider that Symfony was something else, and they built workarounds, which is silly, right? When you can communicate with the right person, then you fixes the issue, and then there's nothing to work around. So Laravel is also doing that a bit. I have some people there, that I can talk to on Slack.
But I think in
But
general
this
the
not-
exchange could be improved between
Yeah.
the projects, or
Yeah,
should
it
be
could.
improved.
Could be worse.
But Nicolas says it does not only apply to open source project, right? So if you're in your company using Symfony and you have an issue with Symfony, don't build a workaround.
That's
Yeah,
very.
Yeah, I go to a lot
Yes.
of projects where I see like issues that have been solved by some kind of workarounds, and I ask why they built that, and they tell me, well, yeah, Symfony doesn't support that, or Symfony behaves strangely in this particular case, so we built this. And then I ask, well, did you open an issue, or did you try to fix it in Symfony itself? Oh no, I didn't have time for that. but this is not how these kind of open source projects work, right? So it's not something that you can just take off the shelf and live with it like it is. You can help making it the framework that actually that you can use for your software. Right?
But I like the idea of, for example, dropping or breaking changes. So Symfony 6.0, for example, dropped the support of PHP 7.0 or 7x and bring the support for 8.0, for example. What's the way Symfony, for example, wants to discuss or accept the way to do that? So this, I think, more a question for you three at that point. What's the way Symfony joins that way to support only PHP 8, for example, and to the other two, for example, what you wish of Symfony at that way more, for example, in future, for support PHP version or for breaking changes or something else?
I think dropping support for older PHP versions allows us to move a bit faster and to actually leverage the new language features better than we could if we will still like support PHP 5 or something. And since Symfony has always a long-term support release and those regular feature releases, I think this allows us to drop older PHP releases more easily, because people who are somewhat stuck on an old PHP release could still use the LTS, so they are not left behind completely. But people who want to use the latest framework and the latest features could move to a more recent version of PHP. I think this is only fair to allow us to concentrate on the features of the framework and not on building quirky workarounds for older PHP releases.
And what you need to add on top of that is that for every Symfony version that is supported, so currently 5.4, 6.2 and 6.3, which is the upcoming release, we provide bug fixes for every new PHP version. So if anything in the next PHP version is breaking our code in 5.4, we will provide a bug fix so that you can run 5.4 on 8.2 in PHP, so that you can change or update your Symfony version independently from your PHP version, so that you can handle both things in different chains and be sure that you are not doing too much at the same time. You can imagine if you're doing the upgrade of PHP and the update to, let's say, Symfony 6 from 5 at the same time, if anything is breaking, then it's really hard to find out, is it Symfony's fault or is it a PHP's fault or your own code that is breaking in a way. And so you are trying to minimize the changes that are being done at the same time.
I think some of you know it, but could you talk a little bit about how you played to the community to do breaking changes, for example, like Symfony dropping, PHP version dropping, or something else? What's the normal way you play to the community? That's your plan, for example, drop a PHP version, for example, that other people can see it in the future more in detail or give feedback or something else?
So first, dropping support for PHP 8.0, for example, which we did in Symfony 6.1, is not a BC break because Composer prevents you from installing this if you do it right. If we're just talking about BC breaks in general, it's that on all minor versions where the feature exists, we will on some of them we will issue a deprecation warning. So if let's say we deprecate a feature that we want to drop in 7.0, which will be released at the end of the year, you will receive a deprecation warning on 6.4. So if you are on Symfony 6.4, any feature that we want to drop in 7.0 will have to emit a deprecation warning, so that if you finally do the upgrade to Symfony 7, you need to have your application deprecation free. And so that's also the case why some things cannot be removed in a way which we would like to do that, for example. So I think we had a discussion recently on the issue tracker about introducing enums for a lot of stuff, which is not something that you can do without building giant workarounds in duplicating the old API, stuff like that.
Okay, I see a question here from Jörg.
Yes, if you're taking questions from the audience already.
No, my side. But yeah, I already told it at the beginning. So
Anybody?
please raise your hand if you have any questions at any time.
Any reaction?
So, kind of a follow-up question to the collaboration question, but not so much focused on bugs, but more like on innovation.
That's the question.
Yes. how much cross-pollination is going on between you and other projects, like for example Sylius and Shopware, or how much is Sulu inspired by stuff Typo 3 is doing, or Symfony and Laravel? How much of the other PHP ecosystem ideas, innovations are going into what you are building?
I feel full to the answer. So I would say that you directly mentioned between Sylius and Shopware, and I would say that in this area there is no too much communication or common solving problem. So I assume that from time to time it happened to me to check the code there, but we are that different that it's hard to take directly some stuff. Sylius was for many years highly inspired by Spree from Ruby, which allowed us to learn from others because the code was open source, so we built some stuff based on that. But right now I do not have any connection or direct friends from Shopware that I could actually work with or just challenge ideas. However, much more of this thing is happening in our ecosystem, which Alexander recently, within a few months ago, just contact me to start a rector effort on Sylius to increase the developer experience over Sylius upgrades. So it was effort from Sulu ecosystem. We were taking a deeper look into your configuration with XMLs because we store most of the stuff in database, which has its own quirks. So we wanted to learn from others, and I learned a lot, and we bring a lot of new stuff from the Symfony ecosystem. We could be probably even faster to allow some stuff, but yeah, Symfony workflow was long awaited feature for us that it's hard right now to bring directly to the project, but you can use it with Sylius. But Messenger was a huge part that we take a huge advantage of right now. I'm looking forward to add finally a clock component. Sometimes we are blocked because clock was from 6.2, which means that because the minimal version for Sylius is 5.4, of course I could do somehow for the newest version to use it, but it's easier to wait for 6.4, and when we will in Sylius do it as a minimal version and then easily upgrade without any issues. So adoption could be better. Shopware Blues was there, so perhaps I will meet someone here so I can exchange experience. But yeah, so in terms of what you said, I think and I feel that there is exchange of ideas within ecosystem because we are based on the same tools, but I do not have that much of it from different projects, so I do not take that much of inspiration from other e-commerce projects.
Good. In our case, there is a CMS garden. If you know that, that's a foundation where open source CMS collaborate or try to collaborate. It's German-based mainly. So, for example, with tiny and there is some collaboration between, especially the open source CMS. So, to the closed one, we are not really, obviously, maybe. But there is some collaboration, especially I know Typo 3, Benny Mack quite well, he's a friend of mine, and we exchange often topics like how he moves further the Typo 3 ecosystem, and obviously they're completely different because it's an old established CMS which is not that easy to move further and improve certain things, and we are like, yeah, the fancy guys build on top of something really new, so that there are really different aspects if you move the community forward. But we try to exchange, and with Contao we have a lot of exchange with Yannick. Obviously he's also quite active in more in the composer area, and there we have a lot of exchange. And we try to have some certain common agreement on certain topics. For example, we try now to bring a search abstraction into the world, which is like every CMS is doing a little bit different and have different adapters, and it's really annoying from time to time. Same, Alex tried to have something like the extension for renderings, like Twig and other rendering engines, but it's not that easy because you're limited, obviously, by time and also by collaboration. And in the end, every CMS also has its different approaches on certain topics. There was PHPCR, which was a try to have a certain content repository for all the CMS or for a few CMS, and yeah, that more or less failed because we are the only one built on that. We learned a lot the way, but we are also going to remove that because it's something we currently need to maintain. That's a legacy we earned, so nobody else is using that heavily, and that's not easy as open source project. If you have limited resources and you need to be aware of what you can do and what not. And so we are also building something which is more specific to our use cases, which more covers the things we want to achieve with certain features. That's really sad because like Neos is doing a content repository, Typo 3 is doing a content repository, so everybody is doing its own content repository because I guess the requirements are a little bit different, and where they come from, it's not too easy to standardize in that area.
If I may just finish something as we were speaking, so in terms of when we need to add some new functionality in Sylius, we are doing some research on the market to see how other companies are doing it, just to also have a brief perspective. It's also one of the main jobs for a product owner in Sylius to also have like perspective how it should behave, so she can deliver the stories or just behavior's expectation to us. But from our side and the developer side more, we learned a lot from Sulu, but we also, I just wanted to mention also AP platform, which we are actually integrating right now. So we have a lot of interaction there. And even Lake Fremont, one of the core team from Sylius, is actually adapting. Not sure how many of you actually use Sylius or are aware of Sylius resource concept. Can you raise the hand, please? I would count it that you are shy. The case is that we are solving slightly similar problem, but for different perspectives. So they're all doing it for API, and we have tooling for RAT with full stack RAT application, and we're right now trying to also move into the direction with attributes, etc. So there will be also less friction in the ecosystem to know how to behave with such stuff, because there is a resource, there are like basic HTTP operation that you can take over it, and just learning from each other, from other tooling that we have the same base is much easier, and you can adapt a lot of stuff much quicker.
Were there following question here?
No.
Okay.
Did you earn anything from this now?
No, we will do it later. If you ask questions, please come later. We do it later, please. Okay. We talk a lot. Well, you were the first one. Where you could start. Was that
I
not?
mean, it's a question, it's not a follow-up question to this topic. So I thought you mean that.
Feel free to ask.
I don't know, does anyone else want to say something about this question? Okay. Yeah, my question would be, if you could change one thing about PHP, what would it be to move the language forward?
Okay, I didn't see that.
One.
Be honest.
Standardize the order of haystack and needle. And you can't change this anymore, but I mean,
There's always a. So I didn't mention that at the beginning. Maybe it's an opportunity to mention that. I'm also part of the board of the PHP Foundation because I'm in Symfony, so they wanted to gather people from the community. So I have a T-shirt also. So if one of you wants a T-shirt, who is sponsoring PHP through the foundation? Okay, so the T-shirt might be for one of you.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I forgot the point.
What would you change in PHP?
Yeah,
one thing.
I
Only one thing.
would kill strict types.
Ooh. Interesting.
But there is a nice gist from Georgias, which is a young developer in the core team, and he wrote an analysis of strict types and why basically they failed at improving type safety in many situations. And I can give you when. It's because of strict types you are casting things everywhere, right? And casting is a weaker operation than the automatic casting that PHP does by default. Like if you have a null, you cast something null to a string, it becomes an empty string. Without the casting operator, even in loose mode, the null will not get through. So this means strict types because it creates additional rules like strict. It's a good marketing keyword. Then your code becomes actually less strict, which is a paradox, right? I mean, it means we fail to achieve the goal. And so in gist, he explains that, okay, the loose mode is actually good, except in some situations. Like there are some type casting things where strings become numbers, even though they are letters at the end of the number, or floats, like strings that contains digits and a dot, etc., which becomes floats, but they lose precision in the process. And so this is loose. This is bad, because then you lose information. And so basically he says we should improve the type conversion system to throw something in those situations, and then we will have no reason anymore to keep strict mode. We will basically merge the two modes together, and I think that would be great.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to do that? You don't need one. Okay. I want to go a little bit step before to the topic before. Sorry, see that coming. The question. You talk before something about collaboration and something else. I would like to know. I think more of you two. What process is it to use components and other components from Symfony? So you're all Symfony ecosystem, you choose Symfony as your framework. But for example, Sulu, for example, drops with Sulu 2.4 the support of Swift Mailer because Symfony dropped it. What's that kind of process to choose components, for example, from Symfony or advanced other components? So we know each other. There are a lot of components that are really good too. What's that kind of process that way?
You want first? Or should I?
I think that we are going to the controversial topics finally. I would say that when you are maintaining the project for many years, and several times the dependencies were added too rashly. It didn't hurt you in the first year or in the half year or anything like that. But after 7 or 8 years over the project, you start feeling a pain of dependencies that were not chosen properly. And it's all built up that I would rather hesitate to have any dependency at all. And because I feel the pain, what is it when the library is abandoned in the meantime. I have several cases that we too early adopt something or for too small reason. But in our ecosystem, there is a constant that I wouldn't be afraid to build on the top of it, which are the giants in the ecosystem: Doctrine, Symfony, PHP Unit. Even though I love Behead and PHP Spec, I already also see that it's harder to maintain them than to maintain the main library or mainstream libraries. So going the standards is much safer bet. And I'm not sure if I have also in the head the quotation that from time to time we were saying to each other that when Sylius was competitor in the market and people were choosing Magento because it's a safer option, and there was no one ever was fired for choosing Magento or choosing the safe bet because there's already established market, etc. So I would by default go with some stuff that is established, that there is a company or ecosystem behind it. That would be the first and most important. But even though every time I would also think about having an anti-corruption layer around it, and there is also another cost of it and consideration if it's worth it or not. Because even though Sylius will never go outside of Symfony ecosystem, the Symfony itself that we'll have in few years, it's totally different than it is right now, and it needs to break changes. And if we'll be too strictly connected to the main repository without any layers in between, we'll also be hurt. For me, it's even form component that changed between 2 or 3 versions. It was a huge pain for us. And of course, it's not on you, but that's how the ecosystem needs to evolve. Luckily, we were before first version, so we could make breaks, but probably some people were hurt even more of that. So, long answer, but yeah.
Yeah, in our case, it's really the same. So in the beginning, we kind of added every dependency we found and thought were important in that case. And now, luckily, we maintain a few repositories outside of our namespace. And yeah, I think the most value we get from Symfony is the predictability and the stability of the versions and the releases, and also the LTS version. And everything which is covered in Symfony is for us more or less a no-brainer. We're going to use that. Because yeah, we have now several libraries where we forked, where we maintain ourselves, and we definitely want to reduce the dependencies on other open source projects and keep it the same. There's a certain quality in Symfony which we want to have and we aim for, and we buy also the things with Symfony that we go with the same pace. We drop certain PHP versions. I think it's a good position where we are in, so we can focus on one framework or two, Doctrine and Symfony mainly, and try to keep our product stable on that version, and also grow and move further with Symfony at the pace. So for us, it's definitely changed over the years. So we try to reduce dependencies on other open source projects which don't have a certain sustainability in the end, because in the end you need to maintain the product
exactly
yourself.
The pain, for example, with Windows State Machine, which is just an implementation of State Machine, because there was no workflow component back then, and right now we need to maintain it for our own because it's like a bone of the Sylius, how it behaves. So we cannot just move all the ecosystem outside of it. At the beginning it was a good idea, there was even no alternative, but right now I would love to put it back on the someone else's shoulders, especially that I have a trust in them. So there was discussion last year about if frameworks like Symfony could duplicate the work of the ecosystem to just have direct and full control over it. And from my perspective, I totally get why there are some decisions like UI component, etc. Why it's better to have the full control. And if I would have a pleasure to have the space for that, I totally would understand that, and I would probably do the same. After a few years of maintaining open source project, it starts to be much easier to understand why they are making these decisions.
Thanks. We have him rise up here. Is it actual?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question. How can we support you as contributors and core contributors, or on frameworks or projects based on Symfony? I also use PHP Central, but that's PHP Cent. But like, is it like checking out the issues, triaging them? Is it making merge requests? Is it GitHub sponsorships? Like, what's the best way to? What's the interesting issue for you as a contributor?
I mean, if you want to support the project itself, then it's probably the best if you work with the project, keep your libraries up to date, and if you have an issue or discover an issue, then report it and try to fix it. And this is probably how you could help the most. You could, of course, browse the issue tracker and see if you can fix other people's problems. But I think you're best at fixing your own problems first, if you have any. So if you have one of those workarounds that I talked earlier about in your code, or you feel like one of the Symfony components, for instance, is lacking a certain feature that you would desperately want to have, then talk to the contributors, suggest a feature, maybe already to prototype it a bit. This is how you can help. Apart from that, documentation is always a good start. Nobody wants to do documentation, and especially the people who implement a feature are really the worst to document it. I always feel that way about a functionality that I contribute. I can somewhat explain what I contributed as functionality there, but there are people in the Symfony documentation, for instance, that are way better at taking the small feature that I contributed and putting this into perspective for the whole framework. So if you are good at explaining stuff, then contributing to the documentation of an open source project is also pretty good. And Symfony is maybe a bad example because this documentation is actually pretty good, but there are open source libraries out there that are really poorly documented. And if you feel like there is a piece of documentation that would have helped you understanding it a bit better, and you like found out by yourself, then maybe contribute that piece of documentation that would have helped you. Those are the examples that come to my mind.
I would say that there's not only contributions that you can send as pull requests, either to Turek and the code. The way I see the Symfony project, the way we try to organize it, is like a sponge, I would say. A sponge of any kind of contribution. Like we structure the Symfony project so that even if someone has like 10 minutes to give to the project, we can make something valuable out of those 10 minutes. And making something valuable, maybe just giving it a try. So it could be possible, it should be possible to give it a try. So you do contributions when you can, all of you, and it varies a lot depending on the year, on the month, etc. You mentioned GitHub sponsorship. It is a way. So we do have a way. You can sponsor me. You can sponsor anyone, many people. We also have a sponsorship program as Symfony. So I know that QOSSMIC is contributing to the sponsorship program. VitExpert, Stefan. So there are companies that decided to go up to putting their logo on the Symfony website. That's a way. And when I mentioned we organize the project as a sponge, this is new. Like you can sponsor Symfony this way since 1.5 years, maybe 2.
Yeah. Something like
And
that.
before we did not realize that some people would just give money. Of course, there's the logo in exchange. So we realized that this sponge should also be organized to absorb those kind of contributions. And I think the general umbrella idea is that the contribution that you can do is any kind of contribution that can break the free rider mindset. Any kind of non-free rider mindset works. Even telling don't have this free rider mindset. Like we mentioned at the beginning, if you have a bug, don't work around. So this is the free rider mindset in code. And then money, because at the end it also matters. So any kind of contribution would work like that.
Yeah, even just talking to other people about Symfony. So, for example, we have the Symfony Slack where a lot of developers are hanging up and talking to each other about Symfony, about their issues, and I see a lot of people there helping each other who maybe have never contributed to the Symfony code, but they just have experience because of using the framework, and they help others with things they are not that experienced with. And I don't know how you feel about that, but from time to time I go there and I ask my questions about components that I do not use that frequently, and then there is someone who has more experience because they have a project where they use this component very extensively, and they can tell me more about that than I could just by reading the code. So that's also important for everyone, because we often hear that people say Symfony has a great community, but the community does not exist just by itself. Every one of you is part of this community, and every little thing that you contribute just contributes to this community being so great. So I think that's also something you can take away from this evening.
In my mind, it's an absolutely brilliant ending. So I realized that you're far from not talking much over an hour. So I would like to end with the possibility of an QA if anyone has something questions. So directly questions to Symfony or Sylius or Sulu or Doctrine. I would like to end with the idea of a little QA, and I think I write a lot of more questions. So
I just got the idea that it's maybe even worth to add that. Well, I can only speak for myself, but I think it's true for the other four as well. You can always reach us via email, Twitter, or on Symfony Slack, or anywhere else where you can contact us. Maybe not by phone, but yeah. I think you know. Yeah, okay. So I made the experience that it's sometimes easier for people to talk with a concrete person and not just shouting an idea into the wild and not knowing if there is anyone else on the other end who is listening. So if you feel that there is something you want to talk about and there's someone who might have an open ear for you, just write something down, and people will tell you if they cannot help you or if it's better to go somewhere else. But don't be shy about that. Sorry.
No, perfect point. So if you don't want to ask for everyone, feel free to write it on Slack, email, or something else at this point. But if you want to ask, use the way, for example, to do that, and don't worry or be shy. Okay.
Maybe just to finalize the topic, something that was also said before, but I just wanted to bring it that moment, which is if you want to contribute or help us with the project, test dev versions, which we covered earlier, but it's worth to mention right now. So there are always in every of our projects alpha, beta, RC versions, which will deliver less pain if you will test it earlier. Just for the whole community, and this doesn't require any additional knowledge on your side. You don't need to commit your time to other projects. It's just as easy as building the pipeline from time to time and seeing the new version, and then committing some time on reporting. And these reports if you would like to be part of a great community, just write good bug reports and do not demand too much. Also some follow-ups. So the good bug report with especially reproducer is pure gold for contributors, for maintainers, and and probably good attitude there between people also helps a lot so we can all cooperate with much more joy. So just bring some small soft skills to that will help.
Thank you. Okay, I think
That's a question.
Well, I only want to say we close the discussion at this point because I know it's hard for you five and easy to hear for you anyone. So we do a little Q&A now, and I think then we should invite them another time again. Okay.
Maybe I just heard from the whole discussion. It's like you are very enthusiastic about everything what you do, but sometimes it seems like open source can also be a little bit frustrating. So are there like situations where you just want to give up, or where there ever be situations like that, and maybe you can share what kept you from throwing and keep on your good work?
I think we all have experiences with frustrations, with the interactions especially. So it's part of the job, I think, because there is a part where we have high visibility, so we are also easy targets. There are also we also have high impact, like we annoy people a lot when we do a mistake, or when someone disagrees, or when part of the community disagrees. So it can be a stressful thing. I think we all have grow some steam on this topic. It's difficult to talk about that because we are personal stories, and so we don't make it personal, of course. But it can be difficult.
I try to remember only the good encounters and less the bad ones. I try to push them away. But sometimes you get not so friendly feedback by people who believe that you work for them. And this is certainly not the case, because nobody's paying me for working on open source projects. But some people behave that way, and this can really get under your skin if that happened to you for the first time. After a while, I probably grew a thicker skin to actually
On my side, I block people on Twitter. No, honestly, when life does, some people that convey their opinion in a way that is aggressive to me, so I just block them. I cannot deal with that.
I think that's something that we also did one or two times on the Symfony repository, that someone got blocked because of communicating in a way that is not appropriate. And I also think we got a bit faster in just closing things down when communications get out of way. So I think if you just want to have your issue ignored, being an asshole is a good way to achieve that.
Thomas, do you have a lot of problems like that on Sulu repository?
No, not a lot, because we are obviously a lot smaller.
But that's exactly my point.
We don't have that issues, I guess, because we are not in the spotlight like Symfonies. But still, you have the situation where you think, obviously, how you do things and get criticism and maybe not appropriate. But about contributing, giving positive feedback is something which really helps to motivate, because if somebody uses your tool and also gives nice feedback, that's not often the case. Normally you only get criticisms or issues or things which doesn't work, so give positive feedback, and that's something which motivates a lot.
Especially the negative feedback is much louder and it's much easier, not noticeable. yeah, I'm also Sylius is already quite a big project, but we are super small compared to Symfony or Doctrine, and some problems came with the scale of it. Of course, there are much more. There is higher probability that you will meet someone who is not pleasant to interact with when you have bigger project. But I've seen enough of it on Twitter or other GitHub accounts. That's to bring it a few times today, because it's something that I do not think should happen, and especially we contribute on our free time. We are not directly related to why do you have demands, and that's something that I think is not fair. That's why I wanted to bring it, even though I'm not heard about it that much. I just see it quite a lot on public channels.
Anyone more?
Maybe it's time for some positive feedback. Maybe some positive loud feedback.